Our next speaker this evening, you know, a lot of our speakers, every one of them who take the stage here are highly accomplished with bodies of work that span domains and often time. But it still becomes necessary to talk that work up because it's often in fields that are not immediately visible to all of us. Our problem with the next speaker is largely the reverse. I don't know how to talk him down. Everything about Jeffrey Archer, including the life he has lived, is larger than life. His books have sold 330 million copies. He is one of the top, 10, I think, or 12 best-selling authors of all time. One particular book in that, just Cain and Abel, which I guarantee 70% of this hall has probably read, but one particular book in that has sold as much or has been read by as many people as War and Peace, as Gone with the Wind, and as To Kill a Mockingbird. There are very, very few authors and very, very few books in the world that can lay claim to figures like that. But the story of Jeffrey Archer is not the story of figures. It is of a wild imagination and an even more wildly imaginative life. I think the best testimony to that, because I will not presume to speak for him when he can do a better job of it than I ever can, but the best testimony of that comes from a small story related to a fundraiser that he was putting together for Oxford College when he was 23. And at that point, Jeffrey Archer, he was not famous and knew nobody famous, managed to convince the Beatles to come perform at Oxford for charity, managed to raise £1 million from that, and then managed to have Ringo Starr say, I don't know who that Jeffrey Archer is, but he could bottle your piss and sell it. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, Jeffrey Archer.
Good evening. I'll try again. Good evening.
I'm still giving you a chance. Phone's off.
Can we before we start, can we kill those two lights, please? I like to see the audience. I don't like lights on me. Take them off, please.
I'd rather
put them on the audience, by all means. Bring the house lights up. I like to see the audience. Hello, audience.
Jeffrey, there's too many strands to this conversation, but let me start by saying, what's it all been about? When you set out on this journey, what were you going after? You know, when you were young and decided, did you want to be rich? Did you want to be famous? Did you want to be infamous? Did you want to be successful? Did you want all of it? Because you've got all of it.
I think when you're young, you not unnaturally want everything. That's very human. I started life after leaving Oxford, wanting to be a politician. And when I entered the House of Commons at the age of 29, politicians were still highly respected and admired. Well, it's fascinating to hear you laugh, because isn't it sad that you laugh? I mean, I was brought up in an era in Britain when I was a child with Winston Churchill, Harold Macmillan, Alec Douglas Hume. I entered the House with Quinton Hogg. I had the great privilege of working with Lord Mountbatten. These were giants. These weren't small people. And now everybody laughs. A country frankly needs good politicians, so that's sad. So I wanted to begin with to be a politician, and came to writing by mistake. I was facing bankruptcy. Thank God didn't go bankrupt. Sat down and wrote my first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less. And that, well, it's very kind of you to applaud, because 17 publishers turned the book down. And the 18th published 3,000 copies only. And they just about sold the 3,000 copies in 1 year. And then they published 25,000 in paperback. And they sold them in a month. So I rang them up and I said, you've sold 25,000 in a month. Are you going to publish another 25,000? No, Jeffrey, it doesn't work like that. No, you write another book. No, I said, you've just sold 25,000 in a month. Why don't you publish another 20? No. Yes, I said. No. Yes, I said. And they finally gave in, and they published another 25,000, and they sold them in a month. So I rang them up and said, are you going to publish another 25,000? No. Yeah, they said they published another 25,000, and they sold them in a month. Last month, I rang up. I said, are you going to publish another 25,000? That's 27,275,000. And I still have to ring them every month.
Jeffrey, you said somewhere in an interview, you quoted Proust and said, we all end up doing the thing we're second best at. You went for politics first and writing second. Did you think your wildly imaginative streak was better at home in politics?
Well, the question I get that way round, funnily enough, a lot of people say, would you rather have written books that have sold 320 million copies, or would you rather be Prime Minister? I think you always want the thing you haven't got. So if I was to answer that question honestly, I'd say I'd rather be captain of the England cricket team. Now, there's a major problem here. I can't bat. No, I am not Virat Kohli. It's a nice idea, but I can't bat, I can't bowl, and I can't field. Mind you, relevance is the refuge of the inhibited. So, yes, I'd like to captain. And who was the gentleman who shouted out, Mr. Kohli? It's tough when you're someone like, you see, I think cricket is test cricket. I think 2020 is rubbish. I can just about tolerate the one-day game. Cricket is a test match between two great sides. And the classic example was when India were playing Australia, and the Australians told India to follow on, and VVS Laxman and Rahul Dravid batted all day, made them bat again and win the match. That's cricket, and that's why I love it. But I think my chances of being captain of the England team are diminishing.
I have a feeling that irrespective of what I ask, you're going to say what you're going to say, but I'll still give it a shot. What were you like as a child? Did you already know that you could tell stories? How did you discover that you could tell stories?
I think, you can see I'm a politician. I'd much prefer to chat to you than have somebody daring to interview me.
That makes
Sit
two of
down.
us.
I think it's a God-given gift. That simply. I'm not a countertenor who sings in the Metropolitan. I'm not a ballet dancer who works at the Bolshoi. I'm not a violinist who plays at the Royal Symphony Hall. I'm a simple storyteller. Once upon a time, and I pray you turn the page. The truth is, it's a God-given gift. The amount of people who come to me and say, well, what's the secret, Jeffrey? Will you tell me the secret? I had a young journalist came to see me about, 10 years ago in Mumbai, and she locked the door when she came in. I was worried about that, I have to tell you. And she came up and said, I want you to tell me the secret of being able to tell a story. Well, I said, to be honest with you, it's not a secret. It's a God-given gift. I'm very privileged. I'm very lucky. No, she said. No, I'm not going to tell anyone. It'll just be between you and me. And I said, no, I promise you. I just get up in the morning, I pick up the pen, I write the first sentence, and off it goes. I can't stop it. No, you don't understand. I am not going to tell anybody. Oh, right, I said. Got it. Well, I get up in the morning in Cambridge, where I live, and I live next to a river called the Cam, and I go down to the Cam, and when I'm 3 foot away, I dig a hole. And in the hole is the next story. She never spoke to me again.
Which was, I imagine, your purpose. Okay. The new book. Let's come to the new book first. Heads You Win. I think you've said that the inspiration for Heads You Win came from reading the biography of Colin Powell and of discovering that his mother, Maud, she'd had to make the choice to leave Jamaica and decide whether to go...
Don't tell the story. It's my story.
Nothing more than what's on the
Don't tell
back
the story.
cover. I wish I could.
Well, I was reading Colin Powell's memoirs, and his mother lived in Jamaica. And she decided, this is serious, unless you're making faces.
No, it's just me saying all I needed to do this evening was to say, hello, here's Jeffrey.
I hope you're not being paid this evening. Because I'm not.
Not enough, Jeffrey.
So I was reading Colin Powell's memoirs, and I read about his remarkable mother from Jamaica, who had to make the decision. She wanted a better life. She had to make the decision whether to go to America or whether to go to Britain. And she chose, as we all know, she chose to go to the United States. She went to New York, and she went to Harlem. And Colin Powell was born in Harlem. So I got to thinking, if he'd been born in Hackney instead of Harlem, would he have become an officer in the British Army? No. Would he have become Foreign Secretary? No. And then I thought, but wait a moment, if you move on 30 years, we now have in England a Home Secretary who's a Pakistani, Sajid Javid, incredibly able and nice man. So 30 years on, the world has changed. So I'll bring my book right up to date, but I won't have a West Indian, I'll have a Russian. Now, I'll have my Russian escaping from Russia. He's 16 years old, and his mother thinks he has to get out because his father's been killed by the KGB, and she thinks the son is next. So she has to make the decision, will I go to Britain or will I go to the United States? And I thought I'd do the double. He tosses a coin at the port. He tosses a coin at the port of escape, and I send him to both places. I send him to Britain, and I send him to America. And you follow two lives. You follow exactly the same person experiencing two totally different worlds. And one goes into politics, and one goes into business, but it's the same person. They're just in a different country. That was the challenge. And the idea came, as you rightly said, the idea came from Colin Powell's mother.
I will go back to my previous question because I do want a sense of, I know, we try. I do want a sense of when you did discover that you could tell stories and how did you come upon, you said you sat down to write Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less at age 34 when you were bankrupt. Obviously,
Didn't go bankrupt, but thank God.
you escaped bankruptcy thanks to the 27,250,000 copies that book has sold till date. But how did you know that you could sit down and write a compelling story?
I didn't, to be honest. When I finished Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, as I pointed out, 17 people turned it down, and my wife told me to go and get a proper job. And I'm not sure she doesn't feel even now I ought to go and get a proper job. Because, of course, my wife is a remarkable woman. She does have a proper job. We both left Oxford at the same time when we married, and then she became a teacher at Oxford. And after that, she went to Cambridge and taught at Cambridge. And then she became chairman of the hospital, Cambridge University's Trust Hospital. She did that for 10 years. And the hospital won Best Hospital in Britain, 2 years in 3 during her chairmanship. And the Queen made her a Dame. So she's now Dame Mary Archer. And recently, she thought her career was over, but recently the Prime Minister invited her, the last Prime Minister, invited her to be the chairman of the Science Museum in Great Britain. So she is the first woman ever to chair a national gallery or national museum. Frankly, I think that's disgraceful. I think she should have been about the 20th, but she was the first, which is an amazing achievement. And while we're on amazing women, let me say to you pathetic men in the audience, pathetic men beware. The next generation in this country is going to be run by women.
You can see from the enthusiasm, we don't let pathetic men in here. Okay. There is something, obviously, deeply competitive in you.
You noticed.
I'm clever like that. Politics, even writing, which many would believe is a solitary pursuit, but you have said that when you have a new book out, you're watching the bestseller lists like a hawk, or rather just one bestseller, like the NYT bestseller list, including for Heads You Win. You said November 10th at 10 a.m., you want to see whether you debut at #1 on the list. Right? You're also, as many may or may not know, an absolutely ace charity auctioneer. He's raised over £50 million for charity. You are a competitive, or have been a competitive athlete. You ran for Britain, also ran at Britain a fair amount, but ran for Britain and also have run marathons. You're fundamentally built to compete. Why then did you choose a pursuit like writing, which keeps you by yourself for long, long stretches of time?
I think if you're born a competitor, there's not a lot you can do about it. You can't get out of bed in the morning and say, I think I want to be second. I get out in the morning, I put my feet on the ground and I say, Mr. Grisham, are you awake? And I'm delighted that the latest book has been 10 weeks at #1 in India, and Mr. Grisham and Mr. Brown are lower down the list. I want to be read. I have no interest in the other aspects of publishing now. It delights me. The guy who was doing my room this morning when I left to come to you, get on the plane and come to you, he said, will you sign this book for my sister? I said, yes, I will. And he told me his sister's name, and I wrote his name to his sister and then signed it. I said, is this a present? No, no, he said, we have a system in our family. Oh, I said, what's the system? He said, I buy it, I give it to my sister, my mother reads it, my mother gives it to my sister reads it, and then I get it. This is not great for authors. I mean, this is, because I am told, in England, it's 2.3 people read a book. In America, it's 2.4. In India, 10 people read a book.
Do the math, Jeffrey.
And if that isn't bad enough, I was coming out of Mumbai airport quite recently when a little boy, good, nice little kid, he's got this stack of books. He taps on the window, so I wind the window down. He says, would you like the latest Jeffrey Archer? I said, I am the latest Jeffrey Archer.
There's a host of themes that show up in your work, but revenge and rivalry particularly frequently. What is your affinity for revenge and rivalry? And does it translate outside of fiction as well?
I hear what you say, and of course, in a lot of the books, rivalry, revenge, ambition, success do play a large part. And while they go on selling millions, young lady, they will go on playing a large part. But I have written several books where that isn't true. I mean, the critics still think Paths of Glory may be the best thing I've ever written. And that came by mistake in the sense that a friend said, have you ever read the real story of George Mallory? And when I read it, I thought we never discovered if he did conquer Everest. We know he got within 700 feet, but we don't know if he conquered it. And I just thought this would be an amazing story. So I have written stories away from that theme. But you're quite right. I don't write ghost stories. I don't write supernatural stories. I don't write sex stories. They sell very well. And I do what I do. And so I say to people, if you're going to write about what you know about and what you feel at ease with. So that's why I write about ambition, wanting to be a success, revenge, certainly.
Since you speak of writing what you know about, art it makes a strong presence in many of your books, including, I think, False Impression is particularly around art, but it's also made a presence in many books. You are a passionate collector. I think there's also more than being a collector. I think you've trained yourself to learn to appreciate art. I think a couple of times a year, you go to galleries or you fly across to Italy or to where a host of the world's leading galleries are and spend time with people who know the art, learning. Where does this passion for art come from? What does it do for you that writing doesn't do for you?
It's weird. I come from a small town in England called Weston-super-Mare, where I was brought up, and I fell in love with a girl who wouldn't go out with me unless I went to art galleries with her. And she was going to read art history, and so off I went to these art galleries near where we lived, and she started teaching me about art, and I fell out of love with her, or she fell out of love with me, and I fell in love with art. And it's been a love affair that's gone on now for 60 years. I just absolutely nuts. This morning I was in Jaipur, and I went to the palace, and I purchased the most superb marble elephant, painted, beautiful, from the museum, and it will go to my home in Mallorca. So it's a disease, really. I can't stop collecting. So even this morning, when I wasn't due to do anything, I saw this marble elephant and just fell in love with it. And it will now go to my home in Mallorca, Mallorca is where I write, and it will go in my writing room. Not least, let's kid ourselves, and of course it's easy to say in India, but let's kid ourselves. India has a special place in my heart. So the elephant will go in my writing room. Now, Ganesh is already there. Now, I'll tell you about Ganesh, who I was told was a god, so I bought him. I like buying gods. But he was in cedar wood, beautifully carved. This is many years ago. About this height, and he's in my room, in my writing room, and the elephant's going to join him. And I went to this lovely shop, and there was this sculpture and I went in and made an inquiry. They said, well, the guy lives in the hills. This is what he does. I was superb, and I've seen some of the best sculptures on earth. So I said, yes, I'd like to take it. And I'm leaving, and I hand over my card. And the young man takes the card, and there's a sweet old thing about 85, 90 sitting behind the counter. I thought she was asleep, but she wasn't. And I'd just done a tough deal with this guy. I thought, I've got him. Mind you, you can never do a tough deal with the Indians. They get you in the end. So I bought Ganesh, and I got my Ganesh, and I've given the card, and the lady said, are you Jeffrey Archer? And I said, yes, I am. She said, you will not pay 1 penny. Ganesh will go to your writing room, and we will not charge you 1 penny. I want to thank you for a lifetime. So the collection goes on and on, but that's a lovely Indian story of how this. Now, the young man chased me down the road. He said, my grandmother can't do that. I said, she has, God bless her.
Let's come to the politics. Again, it's hard to tell the truth from the apocryphal stories, but I'm not even sure they matter that much. Apparently, you said when you were 3, you wanted to be 4, and when you were 4, you wanted to be prime minister. Where did the love of politics come from, and what is the love of politics? Because, let's face it, you don't look like a man who likes to serve anyone.
I sit in the House of Lords still. I've been in the House of Lords for 27 years. I felt as a young man at Oxford that it was the only profession one could go into where you would spend your life trying to achieve, and most of the time you'd fail. But if you got one thing done or you achieved something, it would be worthwhile. And if you were lucky enough to hold high office, you might actually make changes. I go back to the point I made earlier. I know ministers in the current government who are close friends. They have achievements every day. They make real changes. The press don't write about them. Press aren't interested. Something goes wrong, it's on the front page. I'm amazed anyone goes into politics at the moment, but they do, thank God. Some people are still willing to go into politics. And I still love it. Before I came to you, I pressed my button on my phone, got Sky News, and the Labour Party have decided, 2 weeks ago, they decided, before I came, that they're going to try and have a second referendum. And they'll be voting about that on Tuesday. And so Tuesday the 29th is a very important day for me. I should be watching very carefully what happens. But today, just before I got in the car, I read the Labour Party are changing their mind. They're not sure that it's sensible to have a second referendum. So the country is terrifically split over this. And if you're very good, and the chances of you being very good are not good, if you lot are very good...
Thank you.
If you lot are very good, I will end on my Trump story. And if you're very, very good, I will end on my Brexit story, and you'll have to tell me when it's the end.
Or like your book, we could just leave it hanging.
Now. What?
Is it all like one of your books, we could just leave it hanging? Okay. Would you tell us about the time in prison? Because that is, well, that answers that. You did write 3 prison diaries.
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're still selling.
And we have them outside, and they take their name from Dante's Divine Comedies. They take inspiration,
Yes.
right? So you have heaven, hell, and purgatory.
Not a bad writer.
Not, well, thank you on his behalf. What part was most difficult for you to reconcile with for your time in prison?
I didn't find it difficult at all. I wrote every day. Most people who can take care of themselves wouldn't worry about it, and I didn't.
You did still write one volume called Hell.
Sorry?
I said you did still write one volume called Hell.
I wrote three.
Yes.
Three volumes.
So I said there was clearly something there that...
Well, there was a lot to write about. People are interesting.
I think somebody did mention, though, that the stream of visitors you had coming to see you while you were in prison.
All my friends stayed with me.
Yes.
You don't lose your friends. And the public stayed with me as well. God bless them.
But do you have regrets about that entire episode? The episode that sent you to prison or after? Do you have regrets about that time in your life?
Nope.
Do you regret any of it for your
You're
family?
wasting your time.
I've got a lot of it to spare. But no, I'm just asking because
You're wasting your time.
Fair enough. Okay, let me rephrase the question and then I'll drop it because I am wasting
Typical
my time.
journalists, they rephrase it, the same question with the different words. And I'll rephrase my answer. You won't get anything.
Atypical journalist, I'll at least accept I'm rephrasing, but it's the same question. No, I just wanted to know whether that did play a difficult time in your life for your family, as it must have. And clearly, you've all banded together very well and have thrived. So maybe there are lessons encouraged to be taken from dealing with a tough time. That's really the question.
You're quite right.
Point taken. Okay. But as an aside, I think one of your friends did mention, she said the line to meet Jeffrey in prison was longer than the waiting time for a table at Le Caprice. So you clearly turned that into something special. You worked fairly closely, I think, for 11 years with Margaret Thatcher.
Yes.
What was it about Margaret Thatcher that you found remarkable when you saw her close up? And what did we not see of her publicly that you felt needed to be recognized more? Because she is one of the most controversial figures in British political...
And still is.
And still is. And there is no clear position that the country takes on her political legacy. You worked with her closely. How did you see her as a person?
I had the privilege of working with Margaret Thatcher for 11 years. I think I've only come recently to realize how much of a giant she was, because perhaps you can only discover these things in later years. Perhaps you can only discover these things when they've gone. And you're quite right to say that she was a controversial figure, and but there isn't any doubt in my mind she's the most remarkable prime minister we've had in Great Britain since Winston Churchill. I think she's a truly great person. But working for her wasn't easy. I've never known anyone work as hard in my life. My wife always says that she thought she had a strong work ethic until she started getting to know Margaret better. Her work ethic was unbelievable. She would start at 6 in the morning, and she'd go on till midnight. And she'd have 4 hours sleep, and she'd go 2 in the morning. She'd start again. She was staggering, and no one can deny how much she loved her country. No one. And she was hell to work with at one level, and the most exciting person I've ever worked with in my life at another. And I'd love to have those 11 years again. And I wish she was around now so I could say, well, what would you do about Brexit, Margaret? And I think she would say, I'd have never had a referendum in the first place, Jeffrey.
Since you've said we'll come to both Brexit and Trump later, if we're very, very good, what about China? You've expressed interest in, have you visited? China? Have you been to China? And what do you think of China vis-a-vis both America as well as the UK? India has its own particular complex history with China. but what do you think is particularly the UK in a Trump era and what the position vis-a-vis China should be?
Do you know, I'm not ducking it. I don't have a great knowledge of China. I see very clearly in my own mind that India has a fantastic future worldwide. I see that. I can't miss it every day because I come here so often. I can't miss it in my own country when I deal with your countrymen in Britain. I don't really have enough knowledge about China to make a statement that's worth listening to. They're clearly a very ambitious race. They clearly want to dominate the world. They're going to have their ups, they're going to have their downs like anyone else. But I'm really not expert enough to answer that question.
Fair enough. To a subject you do know very well, money, because you made an awful lot of it. Give or take $200 million is...
You know, it's fascinating the way people who've got no money think that people who've got money are only interested in money.
Guilty.
It's absolute drivel. Do you think I'm not being paid to come and speak to you today? I'm here because I want to be here, and I want to be with you, and it's got nothing to do with money.
Which brings me to the question I hadn't asked, because I believe you're committed to giving a lot of it away. And this, not on behalf of this audience, but who are you giving it away to? More seriously.
My wife's been associated with 5 Oxford and Cambridge colleges, so we've left respectable sums of money. When you think how generous the Americans are, these are tiny sums. We're splitting up our art collection between some of the great galleries of Britain, because I feel it's been done in my lifetime. I've been very privileged, I've been very lucky. The children have chosen the pieces they want, and we've invited the Tate and the Fitzwilliam and the Ashmolean and others to come and choose the pictures they want. You only get one go in this life, and I've been very privileged and very lucky. And I feel it whenever I travel. I feel how lucky I've been. So yes, we'll give it away, but maybe I've been influenced by these really big giants, these really big men, like Gates, giving away billions, like Bloomberg, giving away billions. Mine is only pennies in comparison. But I no longer believe that you should just pass on everything to your children. In fact, I probably think that's probably quite dangerous to pass on everything to your children. Somehow you have to make them feel that there's a bigger world out there. And the interesting question someone put to me the other day, which is a variation on what you've just said, do you feel guilty about your wealth? Yes, I do. I tell simple stories, and millions of people buy them. I'm very, very privileged and lucky. So here at the end, and I'm 78 now, towards the end, I think it's time for me to think, what can I do for other people? Certainly.
We'll move to audience questions, and after audience questions, we'll come back for your Brexit and Trump stories.
Oh, right.
Right. One quick thing, though. I know you tell a pretty fascinating story about the publication of Cain and Abel, because after Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, one would have assumed that there was no work to be done to publicize Cain and Abel. But I think your American publication of Cain and Abel owes something to Larry King and something, curiously, to Dr. Henry Kissinger. Would you tell us something about that?
About the American publication? Yes, because Cain and Abel changed my whole life. I mean, Not a Penny More, as I told you, sold 3,000 copies in hardback. Shall We Tell the President sold 12,000 in hardback. And Cain and Abel sold 1 million in the first week in hardback. So my life just changed completely overnight. But it was the weirdest way it changed, in the sense that my very clever agent, clever lady, an American, said, let's auction this book. Don't let's sell it. She was that confident, and I wasn't quite sure what she meant. What she meant was she'd send it to the 14 great houses of the United States. They'd read it for a week, and after a week, they'd bid for it. And the bidding ended at midnight, a week afterwards, at midnight, just after midnight, at 3,200,000. Now, the problem was that not only did I become nouveau riche overnight, but the big problem was that when they got near the publication, they realized that no one in the United States had ever heard of me. And they'd paid this vast sum of money for a book by someone no one had ever heard of. And it looked for a moment as they might lose everything. So they rang me up and they said, we've got a problem, Jeffrey. We've got to get you on television. Now, we've got to get you on the breakfast show. Because that way you can hit 35 to 40 million people in one go. Oh, and that way we'll have a real chance of launching it. Trouble is, they don't like novelists. They'd much rather have a book on how to cure cancer. They'd much rather have a book on the skin. They'd much rather have a book on a better sex life, how to lose half a stone in a week. They don't like novelists, but they rang up at the last minute and said, you're in, Jeffrey. We've got you on Good Morning America with Dave Hartman, the biggest interviewer in the country. Here's the details. Pay attention, Jeffrey. You'll only be on for 6 minutes, and you're splitting it with 2 other people. So you'll only be on for 2 minutes on your own. The first person on will be Billy Carter. And Billy Carter will be telling, he's the brother of Jimmy Carter, the President of the United States, and he is promoting Billy's beer. The next on will be Mickey Mouse. Now, Mickey is promoting 75 years of Walt Disney. And then you go on and you've got 2 minutes. That's 120 seconds, Jeffrey. And because no one has ever heard your name before, you've got to say Cain and Abel as often as you can in 120 seconds. Got it, I said. I'm sharp, I'm bright, I'm okay, I'm there. But they said, we're going to make a big hoo-ha. We're going to bring you over on this new airplane called the Concorde. And we're going to have a stretch limousine meet you and take you to the Plaza Hotel, where we will put you in the presidential suite. So the world will know you've arrived. Great, I said, I'll be there. I'm your man. So they did. They sent me over on Concorde. The stretch limousine was there. Off I went to the Plaza. I didn't sleep that night. I got up and put my best suit on, a tie my wife had chosen. I was ready. And I went downstairs, got in the car. The stretch limousine took me to the CBS, and I went into the green room. There in the green room is Mickey Mouse and Jimmy Carter's brother, Billy. So I sit down, I'm nervous, and up goes Billy. We've got 7:21 to 7:27. Up goes Billy at 7:21. He is good, by the way. He promotes Billy's beer very well indeed. The problem was he took 2 minutes and 14 seconds. So I've now lost 14 seconds. Up goes Mickey Mouse. Now I have to tell you, Mickey was a pro. Mickey taught me that if you know it's the last question, you go on talking. And Mickey did 2 minutes and 31 seconds. So I am now panicking. I am coming up the steps from the green room. I sit in front of Mr. Dave Hartman. I stand there, I sit down, and the book is in front of him, and it is clear nobody, I repeat, nobody has opened that book. He is reading the notes about me, so he knows nothing about the book. He is reading the notes. He says, "Hi, Jeff." Not a good start. "I hear you came over on the Concorde." I said, "That's right. This is an amazing airplane. This plane was built in Bristol, in England. It flies twice the height of any plane the world has ever known. It flies twice the speed of plane ever known. You can have breakfast in England. You can fly to the United States. You can land in New York. You can have breakfast again. This is an achievement of engineering that anyone on earth would be proud of, and I am proud to tell you that, Mr. Hartman." And he said, "It's been lovely having you on the show." My publishers were not pleased. They pointed out that the bestsellers list in the United States of America gets in the New York Times, and it goes from number 1 to number 15. If you get in it, they half the price, so you have a chance of going up. If you don't get in the top 15 in 3 weeks, they send the books back. So they were not pleased with me because my opening week for Cain and Abel in the United States was number 41 on the bestsellers list. So don't worry, we're sending you to Chicago. We're going to send you to Chicago, and you'll be in front of the great Milt Shulman, Nobel Prize winner. He does the biggest radio show in America. He hits about 20 million people, 18 to 20 million people. So you've got a second chance, Jeffrey, and you're going to have 6 minutes on your own. Please, please, Jeffrey, please, could you possibly mention Cain and Abel during the 6 minutes? I got it now. I've worked it out. I'm sorry. I got it. I've understood it. Got the picture. So in I go. What I didn't know about the great man was he doesn't like to meet the person he's interviewing until the interview itself. He thinks you lack spontaneity if you meet the person. You need, oh, fine, I'm ready. Up I go, I'm ready. And I sit in front of the great professor. I sit down and he looks at me and smiles, and I smile back. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have in the studio with me this evening a legend. I have with me a man I have wanted to meet all my life. Will you welcome to the studio the conqueror of Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary." The book shot up from number 41 to number 37. And I was certainly not going home on Concorde. And they rang me on the last day. "We've got one more chance, Jeffrey. We've just had a cancellation call. The Larry King show wants you to go on. Mr. King wants you to do the first 2 minutes. So you got a big chance, Jeffrey. 2 minutes on the Larry King show, the biggest show in the United States. This is your chance. Please, Jeffrey, please. 2 minutes. Could you just mention Cain and Abel?" After you go off, Jeffrey, they are tuning in to Paris to interview Dr. Henry Kissinger, who has been witnessing the President of the United States signing this very important treaty with Russia. And he will be coming on the Larry King show, and for 28 minutes, he will be talking about the significance of this treaty in relationship to world power. "Fine," I said, "lucky to get my 2 minutes. You've got your 2 minutes because we can't connect with him until then. We have to have someone." "Oh, fine, I'm happy, I'm ready." So I'm ready now, troops, I'm ready. I may look slow, but I'm ready. Up I go. I sit in front of Mr. King. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen," he clearly hasn't read the book. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm with a new young author who's written a book called Cain and Abel. Would you like to tell me about Cain and Abel, Jeffrey? I said, yes, Cain and Abel is the story of two men, both born on the same day, one with everything, one with nothing. They only ever meet once in their life, and this one meeting changes their whole lives. That's the story of Cain and Abel. I was very pleased with myself. I was ready. I knew my 2 minutes was up, but I was ready. I'd done it. Yeah, tell me a little more about the book, Jeffrey. What gave you the inspiration? So I did another 2 minutes. And then he said, that's fascinating. Did you base it on two particular people? I did another 2. I began to realize they couldn't get through to Henry Kissinger. I mean, I'm slow, but I worked it out. I got the whole 30 minutes. And Cain and Abel went to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list the week later.
Okay, we'll take questions from the audience. Can the mics please go? The gentleman with both hands up, I think.
Hi,
Good evening, sir.
I've been a big fan of yours. I've read most of your books. I just have a very simple question. What was your motivation for most of your books to have a legal angle and a small town in America?
Most of your books have something to do with the law,
Law.
the legal angle,
And the
and are
stories-
set in small town America.
It started with small town in America.
He's saying, is there a particular reason why the law and the legal system comes into most of your books, and that many of them start in small town America?
I'm fascinated by the United States. I have been all my life. And its history, and I love the country too. So it was obvious that, wasn't obvious, but when I sat down and I decided Abel would come from Poland, and I chose Poland for sentimental and romantic reasons. The Polish were among the first to come to Britain's aid in the Second World War. They came and flew in our planes, they joined our forces, and they gave their lives. So I had an affection for the Polish people. So I made Abel Polish. I sat and thought, if Abel is going to do something really big in life, it will have to be, he'll have to go to the United States. So I had to pick an American, and I picked Boston as the city, where Cain came from, in totally different circumstances. He was born in a hospital that his father had built. So then I'd got the contrast of the two. The toughest thing, the hardest thing, was keeping you equally affectionate for both. I didn't need you loving Cain and hating Abel, or loving Abel and hating Cain. I had to keep you following them through, and I got a great piece of editing, which I'll tell you about. I don't think I've ever told anyone. I've told this story before, but never in India. When they purchased the book, they decided to put a man called Corliss Smith onto it, a legendary editor. He had edited J.D. Salinger, and we were talking about a very great man. And I had the privilege of spending 5 weeks with him, going over every line. It was a real privilege. But even before I arrived in the United States to do this, because he could only work in the mornings, he could never work in the afternoons, so I had to only work in the mornings. And he rang me up and he said, I've just finished Cain and Abel. And Cain and Abel in those days, I did 120 pages of Abel and got him to the United States. And then I did 120 pages of Cain, and I got the meeting. And he rang me up. This is brilliant editing, nothing to do with me. I wrote every word of the book. This is brilliant editing. He rang me up and said, Jeffrey, I love the book. We got a problem. So what's the problem? He said, this 120 pages. By the time I'd got to the end of Abel, 120. I didn't want to meet Cain. I hated him. I didn't want anything to do with him. And when I got to the end of Cain, I didn't want Abel back. I got fed up with it. So I said, I'll tell you what I want you to do, Jeffrey. I want you to do 5 pages of Cain, 5 pages of Abel. 8 pages of Cain, 8 pages of Abel. 20 pages of Cain, 20 pages of Abel. 30 pages of Cain, 30 pages of Abel. And then they meet. And of course he was right. It was simple editing. But of course he was right. And it was a real privilege to be taught by. It was like having a tutorial. Real privilege to be taught by a great editor. So when the end came and I returned to Britain, a sentence I will never forget the rest of my life, I turned to him and said, it's been a great privilege. Because I was then 38. He was 70. He was at the pinnacle of his career, 65, 70. And I said, great man, I said, what is the difference between a great novelist and a great editor? And he said, the first draft. And that's the cruel thing.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
It's so good to have a wise and a funny man on the stage.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Could you tell us about a typical day in your life? What do you do from morning to evening? What makes you happy, sad, and peaceful?
Yeah, sure. Well, it divides into two. It depends whether I'm writing or whether I'm not writing. So on a writing day, I go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. I work from 6 until 8 and take a 2-hour break. I work from 10 until 12 and take a 2-hour break. In that break, in the first break, I have breakfast. In the second break, I go for an hour's walk and think through what I've written. I don't like anyone near me. I don't want to speak to anyone. I come back, have a light lunch, and then I go back to work at 2 o'clock. And I work 2 o'clock until 4, take a 2-hour break, and then I do 6 o'clock until 8. So I write 8 hours a day in 4 2-hour splits. I can't do much more than 2 hours. My wife can do 3, 4, even 5 hours non-stop. I am not capable of that. I need a break. I need to get refreshed and go back and hit it again. Every word is handwritten. So it's a long process. I can't type. I can't use a computer. I'm pathetic. I'm old-fashioned in that way. So every word is handwritten. And the first draft will probably take 40 days. And I'll end up with probably 100,000 words. And then it grows and grows. And then I get the break off. So I'm actually doing that now. Because January to the beginning of February is when that first session is. And so that's over. Now this break, well, I may do a tour to India. So I don't write at all. I might write down something I've noticed in India, but I don't write. And then when I get back next week, I go to the theater twice a week. I love the theater. I read a book a week when I'm not writing. I don't read when I'm writing. I read a book a week. Sorry, could I have a glass of water? I've got one there, I'm being silly. And I have to tell you, which is lovely, I get 100 invitations a week to go to things, which I can't resist. And you were kind enough to point out my great hobby is charity auctioneering. I love it. It's a great hobby. Last year I raised 4.1 million, did 35 auctions. But people say, gosh, that's very good of you. And I love it. I'm like Sammy Davis Jr. Open the fridge door, I'll do 45 minutes. I absolutely love it. So it's a great big contrast, the contrast of what I do when I'm not writing and the total discipline of what I do when I am writing. So it's a very privileged and very wonderful life. I'm very lucky. So, and I'm frightened to stop. I mean, a lot of people say to me, Jeffrey, you could have stopped when you were 40. After Cain and Abel, you didn't need to work again ever in your life. Cain and Abel's on its 124th reprint. 32 million copies. I mean, you don't need to work. I do need to work. And I live with a woman who needs to work. So we play off each other the whole time. The problem is her success lately has been far greater than mine. But it's fun. It's fun. And I can't stop. I'll be 80 next year. And I can't stop. And I'm not going to stop.
Good evening, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I have a compliment and a question for you. I'm right here, the handsome guy in the turban.
Where are the women?
Can you look at me? I'm right here, sir.
I will, sir. I found you.
Okay.
I found you.
Good. Thank you. The compliment is that I love the energy that prevails in you. You've not answered a single question sitting on the damn chair. Every time she does ask you a question, you start measuring the stage, and that's a great amount of energy. Let's give him a big round of applause for that energy that prevails in him.
He's also answered nothing I asked him, so that's a second compliment.
Well, I'm not going to get into that. That's between you and him. And Jeffrey, my question is, I want you to comment on politics and politicians in India. Just let it go. Politics and politicians in India.
He'd like you to comment on politics and politicians in India, generally. But I can make it specific if you'd like. What do you think of our Prime Minister?
Sorry.
I said I can make it specific. Let's start with our Prime Minister.
I know a lot of them, of course, because a lot of them came up during my period and were very young when they came into politics and wanted to be a member of parliament. And what I admired most about them is they weren't downhearted by the way politicians were being treated. I had dinner with, just before I came, I had dinner with the Secretary of State for Health in Britain, Mr. Hancock. And he was telling me about a project where he's determined to give 100 million to build a children's hospital in Cambridge. It did not make one line in any newspaper in Great Britain. Not one line that he'd spent these weeks trying to make this happen. So I have a great sympathy with politicians. I have a great sympathy, not with the bad ones, not with the ones who are genuinely only interested in themselves, but those who get up every day and try to do something. In India. No comment. No, I know you've got an election coming up.
You can't do that to us. Come on.
Mr. Gandhi versus, no, Mr. Modi. It is an old tradition, sir. An old tradition that if you are in someone else's country, you do not talk about their politics. And I have to say, Mr. Trump is an example of someone who doesn't understand that.
And on that note, your Trump story.
Oh,
and then
we've come to the end, have we?
We have come to the end.
Pay attention, children, pay attention. When you're 80, you can call anyone children, etc. Pay attention. Trump goes into a store and he goes up to the counter and he says, "I'd like a hamburger, French fries, and a Diet Coke." And the lady behind the counter says, "I'm very sorry, Mr. President, but this is a library." Right. Got it. A library. Right. I'd like a Diet Coke, a French fries.
And the Brexit story.
One of the problems with Brexit is that we have been receiving legislation from Europe on everything. And in the House of Lords, we have to scrutinize every bill and every clause and everything. And the most recent clause that's been really bothering me is the Europeans want to know how many condoms there should be in a packet. The Greeks want 6. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, never on Sunday. The French want 7. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The Italians want 9. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday. I, on behalf of the British people, have demanded 12. January, February, March. Can I end by thanking you for this amazing turnout? Thank you for your kindness. No, wait. Thank you for your kindness. But most of all, tell you, I'm a simple storyteller. I've been very, very privileged and very lucky, and I will go on telling stories for the rest of my life.